It's Stacy, and I'm here with another friend, Daniel Barnett. Daniel is the author to the Nightmareland Chronicles, which you've heard me talk in nauseam about because I love them so much. And we're going to have a little chat. Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, so I've been writing pretty seriously for a long time now. Over 10 years at least. I've got 4 published books. Right now I'm hard at work on the Nightmareland Chronicles. It's my main focus, or maybe even my only focus for the last few years. It's an ongoing serialized adventure horror epic following one man's journey to reach his estranged daughter in a world claimed by eternal night. And that's pretty much what I do. I got a dog here. I apologize at the beginning if I spoke over you a little bit. He was staring yearningly at me, so I was...
He wants to be involved.
Yeah, he wants attention and dinner too, probably. Yeah, almost bedtime.
Well, we're going to have a little fun here. Give me a second to pull this up. I accidentally closed it. So to start out, to do a little icebreaker, instead of just asking you a bunch of random questions about yourself, we'll get there, by the way. I'm going to do a little Would You Rather writer edition.
Sure.
Okay. I think this will be fun. I haven't looked at all of these, so some of them might surprise me too. So let's see. The first one on here. Would you rather read your writings to an audience of 10 people who you know love you, or 10,000 people who you don't know?
It's a little bit hard, but I'd probably choose the latter just because I meant 10,000 people were listening and that I might actually have a career.
That was an easy one, right? Yeah, so, you don't write just to the people you love, right?
Nervous sweats going in, but yeah, I'll take 10,000 years.
Okay, so the next one, I really think that last one was simple. I think all authors would be like, well, I'm not writing just for my family. Okay, would you rather publish one insanely great selling book and never write again, or publish a string of 15 average selling books over a 20-year period?
Probably the string of average selling books overall. I think it probably would add up to a similar amount in the end, and it means that I'm writing. Writing is what I love to do, so I've been hard to work at it for quite a while now, and can't say I've had any bang out successes financially. So still doing it. So I guess I would take an average selling book.
You've got a lot of stories in you, right? You don't want to stop with one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if I can find a harder one. This is interesting. Would you rather write in a rooftop garden surrounded by city noises, or in a quiet studio with cows as your neighbor?
It depends on the day. I could do either or. Some days I want the quiet space, and other days I want to be surrounded by noise. One of my favorite things to do was write in a coffee shop before all the coffee shops closed. So I'm no stranger to. I've read on the bus. Once I get going for the day, I can write anywhere. So it really just depends. But either are good by me.
That's interesting because I like to read in coffee shops, so it's interesting you like to write in them.
It's fantastic. Especially in the winter season too, where it gets dark really early. If you do your work in the coffee shop, you don't feel like you're you feel like you're in somewhere during the day.
Yeah.
I feel like that's an important kind of mental framing to have, as one day stacks on top of another, not just the same room. Which it has been for a long time. But
Do you ever listen to like soundtracks, or I hear a lot of authors have like certain music they listen to for certain themes in their stories?
I mean, music is definitely important to me, but I typically write in silence unless I'm at some place that has music. Occasionally, I'll like this last week, I had a writing day where I kind of essentially forgot that I left the music on and was writing. That's rare. Usually, I listen to music leading up to writing, give myself a little quiet time, and then kind of get at it. But I mean, sometimes if I love the music too much, sometimes I'm like hearing the words, so,
distracts you.
Yeah, but like once I get going, if I catch the flow, then be a jackhammer outside, it won't really make a difference. You're a dog parent, right? Not a human parent. I was seeing if he would come up and say hi, but he's kind of in more of a quiet, lingering mood than an excited one right now. Maybe later.
All right, one more. Would you rather teach writing in a high school or go back to graduate school for a creative writing degree?
Well, I've actually considered going back to do an MFA at some point or something to get into teaching, but I wouldn't. My preference would be to not teach at a high school level, but to teach at a community college or higher. Only because I know that you don't just teach creative writing at a high school. That's like you have to teach primary something, and that's a 9-to-5 job, and that's hard to do with writing. I've been working nights my adult life to have the time to write, and I worry that would kind of make things difficult to do like a community college level, then you can do like vocational level night classes, things like that. Would be probably my ideal for teaching. A little more set your own schedule to some extent.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I didn't think of it that way. Is the freedom to have a better schedule, but it's also the freedom of the curriculum too, right? High school is going to be a little bit, like you were saying. But that still would be fun to share that with people.
Yeah, for sure. It would be.
All right. So I have a couple other questions here. We already know you're a dog person, but what about being a cat person? Have you ever had any cats?
Yeah, I love cats. I mean, like if I had to pick, I would pick a dog, but I love cats too. I'm an animal person in general.
Me too. I was just wondering because there's a scene in Sleepwalkers with Marcos and the cat, and so I was like, I wonder why he thought that about the cats.
I think I just kind of wanted to explore how the lullaby affected animals a little bit, and kind of something like unexpected and maybe a little bit tender, kind of mixed in with some of the heavier stuff.
Yeah, I did like that part a lot. But there's not a whole lot in those stories I didn't like. Okay, so are you a reader?
Oh, absolutely. Good time. Yeah.
So what are your favorite genres besides horror, because that's cheating?
Yeah, fantasy. I love fantasy. I mean, I pretty much read a lot of different things. I noticed that like fantasy conventions in terms of narrative structure are present in a lot of my favorite horror novels, like Nosferatu or The Stand or It. They all have kind of characters getting bigger from the journey that they face, danger, sacrifice, big in scope, a degree of like good versus evil kind of going on, but sometimes complicated and shaded gray, obviously.
Yes.
Redemption arcs, like a lot of those things are pretty, like a lot of those things are written in fantasy, but it's something I notice is creeps its way into, especially what I really enjoy in my writing as well. I would say I read crime. I love westerns. I love some straighter laced fiction as well too. Like one of my favorite books is, well, I mean, I don't want to say this straight laced. A Thousand Autumns of Jacob the Zoo by David Mitchell. It's about author Cloud Atlas.
I haven't read that. Actually, I haven't read any of his books, but they all sound very interesting.
The Thousand Autumns is like far and away his best, in my opinion.
Okay.
And that's not a slight against his other books. It's one of my favorites ever. It's Joe Hill's favorite book, at least like as of like
Oh, really?
10 years
I'm
ago.
actually reading Nosferatu right now.
Love it. Yeah, fantastic. So when he released Nosferatu, I was there at one of his signings, and that's when he talked about the Thousand Autumns of Jacob the Zoo. And
Cool.
he had like a poster above his writing desk of it. In any case, it's a beautiful book. It's historical fiction. It's got like some other stuff going on in it too. A lot of other stuff actually. But yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I've got all sorts of different kind of things that I read. I probably dip deepest into stay in fantasy or horror the most, with some definite like crime fiction. You know, I mean, I'm repeating myself, but a lot of stuff, I guess.
That's good. I mean, I could definitely see some of those elements that you like about fantasy in your stories. So I could see that those have obviously inspired some of the things that you brought into Nightmareland Chronicles.
Like rediscovering my love for fantasy, or kind of reconfirming it in a way recently. Like I went on a big fantasy kick, and I was like, man, I forgot how much I love fantasy. I need to always integrate it into my reading schedule because I really enjoy it. So it's about enough distance from horror too that I'm able to enjoy it in a little bit of a different way. It's less like being at work when I'm reading fantasy. I find that horror novels have to really capture me to turn off my editing brain and stuff.
Yeah.
They have to be really special a lot of the time for me to really like use like that thinking, working side of my brain. But with fantasy and other, you know, some genres and stuff, I'm able to like it's enough distance that I'm able to just kind of relax into it and really make it a leisurely activity.
Okay. Have you thought about ever writing some fantasy?
You know, I mean, it's like crossed my mind, but when push comes to shove, I always end up kind of writing in a darker side of things. But that said, you know, it's an ingredient. It's like a spice. Like some things that I write are going to have more of fantastical elements to them than others. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I'd rather just not even think in terms of genre as much, but just in terms of the story that grabs me, that I want to share. I know the Nightmareland Chronicles has got a lot of different kind of flavors going on within the series. I think hopefully it appeals to a pretty decent group of people for different reasons. Maybe I
think that's the reason why it appeals to me so much, is it does have a lot of fantasy feel to it. It's not just your typical horror, you know, ghost story or vampire story. It's very different. And so it's very dark, but it's still a more epic story than others that I've read in horror.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. I mean, I'm glad that it's hit that mark for you. I definitely really enjoy adventures at the end of the day. I love journeys. I love adventures. I love suspense fiction is probably the broader umbrella. There's a saying, something like horror is just one room inside like the house of suspense. Something along those lines, I'm paraphrasing. But that's kind of how I feel about a lot of this stuff. And so sometimes, it goes deeper into that horror room in some books than others, and it goes into different kinds of horror as well. But it starts and ends with the characters for me ultimately. So it's about my attachment to them and getting to know them. That's what makes telling the story what it is for me ultimately at the end of the day. So you mentioned that a lot of horror stories are really contained to single settings, and I've written some that are like that as well. Pretty location based. And I think one of the things about the Nightmareland Chronicles that's been so fun for me is the changing scenery and the changing, never know what the next volume is going to throw at me, throw at you, by proxy. There's a lot of different room for variety. There's room for still some humor and some, tender moments and some sometimes more actiony, sometimes it's more psychological, sometimes it's still about just that basic thrill of discovery of a new place or a person, some kind of vista, there's moments, still moments for beauty in this world in kind of surprising ways. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that actually segues us in a little bit into one of the questions I have is, where is it? It's on here somewhere. And basically it's, do you have a favorite character or one that you can write easily that comes naturally to you? And is there one that is actually really difficult for you to write?
Maria is almost always easy. I love Maria in terms of her voice is just really, really natural, and it's an easy one to find. I find other times hard voices. I wouldn't say that I've had any voices that have been particularly hard in this series. It's not always been the case with all my books. John can be sometimes a little tighter, to write than others. He's got a very focused, determined sort of perspective. Sometimes that this means that it's a little bit more your way of thinking when you're trying to think like John is a little more constricted. But then there's also development with John too, so that changes as well a little bit as the series goes on. As some of his stuff starts to crack a little bit as the series progresses, and he starts to be a little bit more human in some ways.
Oh, I'm excited.
But I wouldn't say necessarily that that it's hard to write him. It's just not as easy as it is to write Maria. It's she's got a little bit more humor and a little more thing kind of hang and roll with, more dryness going on.
Well, she's definitely my favorite so far. Although I love Marcos too.
Yeah, I love both of them. And Marcos is somewhere kind of in between. It depends on the scene with him. There's some that have been really easy to reach too. I had this conversation just last weekend on Ink Ice with Shane Douglas Keene and Rich Duncan, and Rich had asked me about the relationship between Marcos and Maria. And it kind of stuck out to him in a way, and he was curious about what that meant to me, if it meant anything. And I was pretty forthcoming about I enjoy writing scenes between Marcos and Maria almost more than anything else in the series, like just them goofing off or whatever. Just the little moments between them are like my favorite things to write in the series. So even more than a lot of the scary stuff, like whatever. I mean, I just love those human moments between the two of them.
I think that that you could tell that when you're reading it, because those moments are so powerful, and it's almost like you could tell that they just kind of spilled onto the page for you because they feel so realistic. And I have to say, I was laughing out loud. There's the part where Maria, and I've been saying Mariah, so I apologize. I've been pronouncing it wrong.
There's actually that's on me. That's totally on me. It was like I like the word Maria, but I like the way Mariah was spelled, and then I meant to change it back at some point, and I never did. And so now it's like Mariah to everyone and Maria to me, and that's just.
Well, for the purpose of this video, I'll call her Maria just for you. But there's a point where she's learning, where she finds out that Marcos can teach her how to sign. And she's like, I'll let you teach me, but first you have to teach me the touch words. And I was like...
He's trying to get my attention here.
I think he wants attention. Is that a llama?
It is. It is a llama with a big buck tooth.
How cute.
Too much.
But,
do you want to go and say hi? Yeah, sorry. Please go.
That's
please
okay.
Go on.
No. Trust me, we've got time.
Yeah, that scene. That I actually mentioned that with them as well. That same part with the, teach me all the swear words first. I know what to call John. They have a fun dynamic, and I feel like their relationship is both like really definable, but also kind of indefinable in some ways, or maybe not. That's not the best way to put it. Like it's really understandable, but it's like different to each of them. It's just it matters a lot.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you that well.
How?
Okay, so you're saying about Maria and Marcos, their dynamic.
Yeah, like it's in some ways like a mother-son relationship, but it's also has like other elements to it too. There's a friendliness there that you wouldn't have between a mother and a son necessarily. The way that they kind of like mess with each other and stuff periodically. And then there's also kind of the element of Marcos being, like 13 going on 14 thereabouts, and Maria being like a pretty young woman, and like, he's also like a little bit like a little awestruck by her in some ways sometimes. Just like it just has a lot of. I just love the both of them a lot. I guess that's nothing much to pick apart there, other than they're both really dear to me, and together especially.
Okay, so we kind of skipped over the get to know Daniel parts. I don't know if we want to circle back, because there's some interesting things I think all of us readers would like to know about you, like. What would you say is your most interesting writing quirk?
Man, which one? I don't know. I think pretty particular about like some things coming to my schedule in the morning. Tough one. There's nothing that's like really cute or endearing. It's just like little things that, and I've actually kind of broken some of them recently on purpose. Some of my rituals. I used to be really, really particular about the amount of caffeine I allowed myself each day. Now I've actually kind of gotten off caffeine, so it's a special thing for me. I'm writing on my own power most of the time now, which is seems to be a really nice change of pace for me. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can. There's nothing much interesting to say there. Like writing is just kind of like a grimy, lonely job that we do. You know,
That's fun.
like it's special to me, but I don't have like a cute thing that I wear to write or anything. You know,
That would have been interesting.
or anything like that.
Okay. What do you like to do when you're not writing?
Yeah, I'm a big runner. I like to stay active when I can, stuff like that. Play games, do a lot of reading, hang out with my dog. It's a pretty simple life, especially this last year. I mean, the kind of things have been limited, but more recently I've started to see friends again. You know, I got a buddy, named Slater. Go to the movies. We went and saw Saw yesterday. That was pretty fantastic.
Is that the new one?
The new one, yeah. It was. I think I enjoyed it more than he did, but I'm also on a really, really bad horror movie kick right now. Like I'm like, the worse the horror movie is, the more I like it. It's really, I can't explain it, and it's been going on for like 3 weeks. It's very rare that a phase lasts that long for me, but like all I seem to want to watch are bad horror movies, and I'm actually kind of sometimes annoyed when they're good because I have to pay more attention to them. I don't even know what that's about. It doesn't make sense.
Maybe that's your interesting quirk right now.
Maybe. I mean, like I watched 7 of the 9 Leprechaun movies or something like that.
Oh my god!
Leprechaun in space is special. Let me tell you that. Also, The Howling 3 is really special because that movie has marsupial werewolves in it.
Yeah, I saw you mention that on Twitter.
And like, I don't like, my headcanon for that movie is that the director made a movie just for like himself or herself. Like they didn't give a shit about like anything. Like that movie defies markets. Like it defies having an audience. It's PG-13, but it's also really weird and also abundantly like so tediously slow. It plays like a Hallmark refugee movie about like werewolves who are kind of like ostracized from society and on the run or like abducted by government agencies. And it's just like it's like an Australian outback adventure with no adventure. It has no horror in it. It has like no action in it at all either. And then there's just this one scene where the woman gives birth to like this like chittering little like marsupial werewolf human hybrid thing, and then like puts it in her pouch. And it's like a 3-minute scene that's super uncomfortable and weird, but like, it's trying to be cute. And like there's nothing in this movie that would appeal to anybody in the whole world. And I like to think that the director was just like, I've made my movie for me. Like I'm happy. Because it's just like marsupials aren't even like a cool hybrid for a werewolf. Like there's nothing there it's like a werewolf with a pouch, but not.
He must have had like a nightmare and just said, "I'm going to make a movie about this."
It's just like not dark enough to be a horror movie. It doesn't. It really just. It literally just like turns away from every potentially interesting thing that it could do. Does a couple weird things, and then it's just like mind-numbingly boring the rest of the time. And then it's over. Yeah, great. I saw the movie Marsupial Werewolf. I always needed that. Okay. Yeah, so bad horror movies have been my pick lately.
All right. Let's see. How many books have you written, and which one is your favorite?
I've written 4 novels that I've published. Count my trunk novels. I think I wrote 6. Then, well, okay, some of the Nightmareland Chronicles books are like in novel category. I know Sleepwalking is, and I think City of Blood is. If you count the 40,000 range as a novel, which it is on like most by most criteria. But my favorite's always what I'm working on right now, essentially. So that's the true answer. But if I look back at like my backlog, I would probably say Longgrave. It's I don't know if you watched The Haunting of Bly Manor, but when there's a scene at the end where she's like, this is like every ghost story is a love story. I had that like Leonardo reaction meme moment, the one where he's like drinking a beer, smoking a cigarette, pointing at the television screen. Yeah, I had that myself because I love. That's what Longgrave is to me. It's as much a love story as it is a ghost story. I mean, it's a very dark love story about a man who, after separating from his wife, he kind of irrationally, inexplicably moves into this recently closed hotel where he worked his entire life. So he's like living in this abandoned hotel, and the power's going off, the water's going off, and it's getting cold. It's winter, and then it's a ghost story too. And there's some stuff, a lot of like tangled family secrets to uncover. A lot of, it's a really deep exploration of grief, or at least it attempts to be a deep exploration of grief. But yeah, it's a love story. Not a traditional love story necessarily, but I think it's part of it is the fact that like when I first finished it, it was 180,000 words, big book, and then I edited it down to just like a normal big book, which was 117,000 when I got through all my edits. A lot of pairing, a lot of like rewriting, and spent so much time with it. It was just so personal. And by the time, the whole thing was really personal to me. And in some ways, like if I were to revisit things now, I'm sure there would be things that I would change in terms of like how I approach stories now is a little bit different than what I did then. But I think it's ultimately a pretty successful novel. And I've had some people, share with me what it meant.
It sounds like something I need to pick up.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, the kind of horror novel you were talking about not liking is kind of Longgrave is, but I don't know. It's a quiet horror novel. It's got a lot of like layers to peel back and stuff like that. Not an adventure. It's very like personal and intimate kind of stuff. But maybe you would like it. I don't know.
Well, I'm not a big fan of ghost stories. Yeah. Not because I don't like ghost stories, but that's like one of the things where it's just too real. Like I don't even know how to explain it, but so they creep me out. Like of all books, that's the thing that creeps me out. But I really like The Shining. Okay. And so I'm thinking I might like Longgrave. So
yeah, maybe. I mean, I always love to share it and hear what people think. It's fairly heavy and dark, and it too has its like brighter moments. Is that something that I think is kind of a staple for me? I always kind of think of horror as like, put a man in a dark basement and give him a candle. Like the candle seems pretty bright. Yeah, by the contrast, and kind of apply that to stories. You can really sometimes capture a lot of beauty in a really striking way, or like, and it's not like beauty, like anything like generosity, kindness, like it could literally, or it could be literally like something visually beautiful, but like an emotional component to it as well too. I think that's one of the things that Stephen King is always really good about doing, is really finding that human moment. And there's something about finding that human moment, like in the midst of something that might have like a lot of despair or like figurative little darkness. It stands out in a way, or I think of like, it stands out in a more striking way a lot of the time. It hits different, About The Girl Next Door, I always think about the scene where they're riding like the roller coaster at the amusement park before that book just becomes the hardest book to read ever. Have you read The Girl Next Door? Maybe don't. I don't know. It's one of the hardest books ever to read. It goes to some really dark places, and the fact that it's based on a true story is also what makes it so difficult. But there's a scene early on where, like, before these kids' lives just like go to ruin and hell, like in the most just terrible way possibly conceived. They have like, this like. There's just a sweet moment at like an amusement park, and again, I'm also really sensitive to like sentimentality and like mawkishness. Like I don't like those things at all. It has to be earned in my stories, or I'm not talking about the stories I'm writing. Obviously, I'm trying to write things that I enjoy, but in stories, like in the stories that I love the most, it's those earned moments, those little moments that stand out to me. When an author reaches for something, you can feel like, like they're not earning it, but they're trying to make you feel a certain way. That's a big turn off for me. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Like, but in any case, like those little moments where it's like some degree of like humanity or like human insight is captured and put on this like unique and striking display. Those are the moments that really resonate with me. I mean, I think of The Green Mile, where he visits his family and he's like all skeeved out because he's thinking, okay, these guys are. This couple is like related, like they're brother and sister. Like they look so much alike, and then finally realizes it was just grief, and the line is just something simple like, "It's strange how pain marks our faces and makes us family." And like I still think about that. I haven't read the book in years, but I have it memorized. I think about it like all the time.
I haven't read Green Mile, but the movie was so powerful.
Yes, one of my very favorites of King adaptations. So
yeah, and I'm not always a big fan of Stephen King's adaptations. Most of the time, the books are way better.
Oh, absolutely. I think that like I trust Flanagan and Darabont, and that's just about it. If I pronounce his name, I apologize.
Shawshank Redemption isn't too bad.
It's the same guy who did Green Mile. So.
Oh, well, that's why.
Yeah.
So speaking of Green Mile, was that what inspired you to do the serialized version of Nightmareland Chronicles?
It's definitely on my mind, but I would say it was more Hugh Howey's work. Hugh Howey was, are you familiar with him? He's a science fiction and sometimes fantasy, but more science fiction, I would say. Science fiction, yeah. He does science fiction stuff, and he is a self-published author. He got a lot of success by being, a really tremendous author, first and foremost, but the format he would write things in is this serialized format. He would do like 5 parts something, and then he released the omnibus at the end. And like the collected thing, and it would be like a nice solidly big book, but compiled edition, like the completed story. He got really on the radar for a serial called Wool that was picked up by Ridley Scott, but then never made for whatever reason. These things happen or don't happen sometimes. In any case, I really appreciated that format. Thought it was a really cool thing, and I like that idea of telling these somewhat smaller, somewhat contained stories that are part of a larger whole. So like they're still hopefully doing it right, satisfying in their own way. Like each one is satisfying. Has that feeling of like a beginning, middle, and end, climax, some degree of resolution. but it's still part of this interconnected thing. And I think for a road novel, which is, so much what the Nightmareland Chronicles is, very from place to place, the serialized format has been like almost like a television show. You have episodic kind of nature to things where it's just some of them have like a 3-act structure, but not all of them do. But they all hopefully have that feeling of still beginning, middle, and end. And I think it allows for a lot of variety, different kinds of satisfaction, different kinds of anticipation from one book to the next. Some books tick a different box than other books do. Like book 3 has a lot of human stuff going on with it, a lot of like human danger, a lot of getting to know new characters and getting to know Marcos more, and like this like foundation of a relationship between him and Maria. But then book 4 is more action. More immediate visceral danger right from the get-go. They're just kind of like, right.
So let's start talking spoilers. So anybody who's watching this, warning, because I really want to talk about the books and the things that I like.
Absolutely.
So you talked about them having a beginning, middle, and end. And that was one of the things I was going to bring up. It's like every book has its own challenge, its own conflict that has to be overcome. Like that was done on purpose. You said, I need to have some kind of climax. So there's a solution at the end of each installment.
The last thing that I wanted going in was people to feel like I was splitting one book into a bunch of books for the sake of like money. So not like I don't make money off of writing, at least like the amount that I spend on it is far more than the amount that I made so far. I mean, I would like to turn it into a career one day, but that's still just like a pipe dream. Until everything starts to change or, whatever. But in any case, I don't want it to feel like I'm manipulating something. Like I'm just, you don't like those books. Like if somebody's paying for something, like paying for a product, it needs to be satisfying in its own right. So there's nothing worse than reading like something that just doesn't have an end. Like, and then like get the next one, and it's like, why? This one didn't even have an end. Is the next one gonna have an end? And some books are more successful in the series than others. I would say, like some books like have like a more impactful ending, but hopefully they're all successful in their own right. And then also when you take them as like a part of the whole, this like hopefully, even though sometimes some of the softer endings, like the ending of book 2, is a little quieter than 3 for sure, or even 4, or even 1. Probably the quietest of the lot. But like when you also look back at it as a whole, it feels like its own ending, and it feels like it's satisfying a different kind of something. Like Maria has overcome her own. We can do spoilers now. So yeah, like Maria's journey through the desert is very like on the conflict tree is very woman versus nature and woman versus self. So that book didn't have space for like a visceral climax, especially since the nightmares haven't like literally manifested really yet, come into play, not in this location at least. And so there's more like it's more about the internal movement and this like kind of feeling like this passage of time, like haunting imagery, the plane, the mystery kind of still like unfolding, but also wrapping tighter in some ways. And then finally, like she did it, and she did it on her own. Mm-hmm. And And then seeing Marcos and acknowledging right away, like, what his importance is going to be to her. Hopefully at this point we've learned to love her, and then like right away by extension, knowing that she's going to come to love him already is like pulling us like into the significance of these relationships. I mean, just rambling on, but I think that's what we all read for at the end of the day, ultimately. Like, I think the books we remember the most, it's not like when the glorious thing happened or the splashiest thing happened. I mean, sometimes a little bit, but it's typically the characters. Like, those are the books that stick with you the longest, are the ones that have characters that felt real to you. You like find yourself thinking like, oh, I wonder how like Todd is doing today, and then you're like, oh, shit, Todd's like not real, but he was for the portion of time you read it, and then he kind of like lived on for a while with you, maybe even indefinitely in some way. And that was always the kind of story that mattered most to me. So with these, again, I'm gonna always kind of like continue to orbit back to the characters. That's what matters most to me.
The characters in Nightmareland Chronicles are just, you've written them so well that I mean, I want to know more about what's happening, right? There's so much mystery surrounding what's happening in the world, but I keep picking it up because I want to read more about what's happening for the characters, especially Lullaby. I didn't really think Maria was going to play as big a part in the story. I thought she was just kind of going to be that secondary character that kind of follows along. So when in Lullaby, it's like, wow, she's going to be her own person. And you actually get to know her better than you even got to know John in the first book. So I just really liked how real she became. And that, I say this a lot in my reviews. If you'll probably hear me say it tons more, is I like a strong woman who's strong because she's a woman, not because she's got superpowers or she's so good at something and nobody knows why she's so good at it. She's a real person, and she's strong because she's got qualities that make her that way, or she's overcome something that other people haven't been through. And you've written that really well with Maria, because you could see how she's stranded. She's trying to find a way to get out of there. She hasn't given up, and she could easily have just left John in the dust, but she doesn't. And a lot of it you could say, oh, he was too heavy for her to get out of the car. No, it wasn't that. It was because there's something inside her that says, no, if I'm going to make it, I'm going to take him with me. And she continues to help him. And I loved that part of her character, because it could have been, she could have, any normal person would have been like, is this worth it? I've got to keep feeding him and giving him water, keep him alive.
Yeah, wiping his ass.
Yes, no, thank you. And considering their relationship in the beginning was pretty daunting for her, right? She had these feelings for him that he didn't return. And she was kind of, I don't know, I guess her anger, her bitterness could have been more, you wouldn't have blamed her, right? But instead it didn't become her. And she instead continues to have feelings for him. And oh man, there's a scene in Flashlighters when John finally writes the note to Marcos asking him his opinion. And I was like, oh, finally, maybe they're going to start having like a little found family here. And then this is the thing with John. I keep thinking I like him. And then he does something and I'm like, I don't know, this guy's dark. And then he does something else. You're like, oh, I don't like him. And then he goes and pushes that guy into the mouth in the last book. And even though I understand why he did it, okay, I was still like, what a jackass.
So brutal.
It is brutal.
Yeah.
And it just seems like, and you were saying earlier that he's very determined, and he's like, he knows what he has to do and he just does it. And he doesn't really, doesn't let emotion get in the way. And that scene was perfect. Perfect. If you weren't sure about who John was, you figured it out there by that time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love talking to people because there's like definitely camps, and I feel like a lot of people landed in the Maria camp in these first books, which is really fantastic for me because I was honestly a little bit had a little bit of trepidation that people would resent that John had been backseated for so long. Like I think in the scheme of the series as a whole, it really won't feel that long, but like right at the beginning to backseat him the way that it did was definitely kind of a significant play, like game changer. You know, it really turns the spotlight from him onto Maria. It's like, you know, can she carry this on her own? Can her and Marcos carry this on her own? You know, it's 2 books almost where, and it's the longest book thus far up until the first 5, where John is like, he's down for the count, like, largely. And there's a lot of different reasons for that move. But I was still, you know, I was confident in it, but I was still nervous that people would be like, hey, I got into this series for John, what the hell? And so seeing a lot of, you know, there's a lot of people who, you know, come out of book 2 and 3 saying, you know, Maria is my favorite character. And that's really special for me because she kind of is mine too. Like, they're all, I mean, it's in different ways for me, but that's definitely something that's like, it's a victory to hear that. And I know with John, you know, he is an asshole, but that's part of what like makes Maria so much fun to write is like she's not scared to like call him on it.
Yeah.
You know, like to make fun of him, like, you know, to his face and behind his back or like whatever. You know, there's this element there that's like there's this tension, especially at the beginning of book 4, where and it's like another what felt to me as an interesting dynamic is like, you know, you've got this man on his own epic journey, and then all of a sudden he's like third wheeling. Like there's this kid, he doesn't know this kid, he doesn't have a particularly good relationship or like historical relationship with young men. If we go back to Nicholas Crowder, so there's like, and like, you know, he does some pretty asshole. Like, I mean, he almost runs Marcus over at the beginning of book 4, but then this all these moments, you know, then like Maria kind of lets him know where it all stands after that, like right away too. So like they allow each other these moments that neither of them would have on their own, and it's just one of the fun parts about storytelling is just seeing that stuff happen like on its own, you know, not knowing it's going to happen necessarily. It's going to happen, you know.
I don't know how you do it. It's just, yeah. When I was a teenager, I thought I was going to be an author one day, and no, I have great ideas. I just can't put them on paper. I let my brain get involved too much. So I admire people who can take something and just let it grow into a story. And I don't know how you guys do it, but especially Nightmarelands So where did you come up with the idea to have nightmares essentially be brought to life in the story?
That's I don't know where the idea came from per se. I know going into book 2 and 3, I was still sort of formulating what exactly was going to happen. I mean, like I knew the parameters that I was working with, framework that I kind of established for myself. I knew there was going to be a sort of, you know, so there's the Nightfall, which is the first shoe, and there's the Lullaby, which is the second. But it's that second shoe that drops that creates the conditions for this world that will either be interesting enough to sustain a series or not. And so that was one of those things, like it didn't start with, I mean, like, I knew it was going to be nightmares, but I didn't know, like, you know, if it was how do I put this? There were elements. I guess I can just be vague about that. It's just like too deep, like, or too particular to go into the technical detail of like what I did or didn't know. But there's this elements that I wasn't certain of, and I had to get those straightened out to an extent. Because ultimately, what I wanted was this nightmarish world. This dark world, I should say, with nightmares populating it, that are kind of like the last, even like they're like the nightmares are like what's left of humanity, essentially. It's like what we left behind after we died with our nightmares, and I wanted something where, 8 books in, we can still surprise, like the reader can still get a thrill, some satisfaction, be surprised, where essentially establishing a world where the rules aren't so tight and constricting that things become repetitive. I wanted something that has room to continue to grow. And I mean, even for the first 5 books, we haven't even like fulfilled like the progression yet. Book 1 is like, each thing is built around an event or a place or whatever, but it contains something. So book 1 is Nightfall, book 2 is The Lullaby, and then book 3 is like the living remnants of The Lullaby, kind of focus. It's the sleepwalkers, the sleepwalking. And that's quickly not relevant anymore unless somebody's there to take care of them. They die, because that's what we do when there's nobody to take care of us. But wanted to explore this thing one piece at a time and explore either potential outcomes. You either have to work hard to take care of somebody that's like it's unpleasant to take care of them. You feel their nightmares, the kind of residue. But you either do that and risk them dying of natural causes, which releases the nightmares, or you can kind of cut the cord yourself and kill them, and that's the safer option. But not necessarily the most humane one. There's a monstrousness to that as well. So it's about putting these characters, the ones that are left in awkward, difficult situations, where they really have to sacrifice a lot if they're going to try to keep somebody alive, potentially nothing. You don't know if there's ever going to come a time where they wake up. There's no guarantee that there will be anything other than just this challenge of keeping somebody alive and living with the discomfort, like the very literal discomfort that comes from that. But so book 3 explores kind of like the beginning presence of the nightmares. I really wanted to ease people into this stuff, like step by step. Otherwise, it would just get outlandish so fast. Like, if there had been nightmares in book 1, it would have just been like, oh, the lights out, nightmares. Like, it just turns into like this, like, it's like fun and silly, maybe at best. But I think like I would have lost the potential to ground readers in this world if throw too much at them all at once. So to do this idea of just the way I tell stories, what feels like doing this justice to the best of my ability was to really ease readers into it, really get them close to the characters and watch like reality as we know it kind of get peeled back one little piece at a time until finally, give them space to be kind of like shocked and react to each new thing. So book 3 gets really deep into what it means to have a world full of people who are sleepwalking, to try to take care of them or to kill them, and what happens. Like, what's the danger? And you get like a hint of the danger, but it's still a human danger in book 3, more so than anything else. You have the upside down man and the eyes under the bed, and like something like a hint of something somewhere else. The auditorium at the end, something was coming. As they got, something was coming in any case. But then book 4 is the first one in the series where it's like, okay, we've established the rules. Let's like bring bring some nightmares out to play. We don't need to explain it all anymore. There's nothing to like count for. Let's just like start dishing it out. But still, we're talking like lonely backwater highways, that kind of thing. So book 5 is the first time we actually step foot in a city and see a place that's been was populated by nightmares, and, you know, explore new questions like, what does that mean for a place? You know, and what does it mean when a lot of people have the same nightmare, perhaps, in a place? You know, the scale like grows. Like, so, you know, we have like small personal nightmares before, and then scale grows to 5 to kind of encompass, you know, something broader and bigger and a different kind of frightening, and, you know, and then so on and so forth. But so it's not really until the end of book 5 that we have finished growing the world to its full, like, you know, almost halfway through the series, to kind of fulfill the scale, kind of like grow it all out and answer the questions, or give enough for people to imagine they know enough.
So you have the whole series outlined out. You know how many books it's going to be, and
oh no, not at all. I don't have anything outlined. And like I'm figuring stuff out as I go along the way too. My best guess is 12. And that 6 is what I'm working on now, and it's the halfway point. It's going to be like a supersized season finale. It's much bigger. Like, it's a big book. Period. Like, not relative to the Nightmareland Chronicles. Like, just big period. I wanted to give. There's a couple different reasons for that, but ultimately I wanted to give readers this, like, kind of this something really to chew on. It might be a weight between 6 and the rest. So I wanted this big. I mean, it's a big emotional turning point in the story. It's got a lot of big turning point elements to it. I really wanted people to like literally feel the weight of that book when they get to it. Like, Lily is like, volume 6 of Lily. Like, it means something here. Like, we're going to get a lot in this one. And yeah, so, you know, think of those like TV, you know, those HBO miniseries, like limited run things or whatever, where you get to the last episode of the season and it's twice as long as the other episodes. And you know you're going out for a while, but you're going out with bang. Like, there might be more, but you're going to have to wait a little bit.
Is that your plan, to take a bit of a break after the 6th book?
It's not so much about taking a break as it is, like, I had finished writing the first 5 before the first one was released. So, like, I've been working on this for 3 years. It's just only in this last year, May 30, the last day of this month, is the birthday of the first book. So, yeah, so it's really more just about, I think it's making the readers wait a little bit longer might not seem fair, but I think it's more fair than like releasing them when they're finished and trying to keep up a schedule that I would have possibly have available. Even this time around, like, Lily's taking longer than I expected it to, and so the release date, I'm not able to set the release date for that yet because I'm still working on the manuscript, and I think it's better for the whole process. It's also about like have a lot more leeway to like revise something that's been published. So if I need to like tinker with something, like there are things that it's a little easier to do. But yeah,
I'd rather have a masterpiece and wait a while than have something just thrown together and have it soon. So I won't complain, but I will be waiting.
Well, I don't. I mean, I might have to take a break for like personal life reasons. Like, I'm, got to like figure out what I'm doing in terms of like going back to school and stuff. But I mean, it's my goal to just continue it. I don't have any other thing that I really want to work on. I mean, I'm just saying I can't guarantee that personal life won't get in the way.
Right.
It does, but yes, I would like to finish. I would like to finish after releasing 6. I'd like to finish the rest before releasing the next, because then I'd be able to tell people more reliably and stick to a schedule. And also, I've had some people point out, like, oh, you don't do recaps, or I mean, sometimes I refer to things that happen, and sometimes it's you can kind of refamiliarize yourself a little bit with what happened in the last books. But some of those series, they literally have recap pages where it's just exposition for the previous stuff to the readers back in, and I totally respect. I mean, even the Green Mile did that. Had some stuff where, but I respect it, and I know it would probably be better if I did it in some ways. But at the same time, I just can't bring myself to do it. The story picks up where it picks up from, and so in that regard, releasing them a little closer together is asking less of the reader, asking them to remember less, or rather, not asking them to remember as much over a longer period of time between releases. Less possibility of being wait, who's this person again? Not thinking it won't happen. I know it's happened with some, but I understand why. I don't know. I'm also aware of I'm aware that eventually the most people continue to read it down the road. Eventually the most popular version is probably going to be the compiled edition, 5-10 years from now, or whatever. And with that in my head, I want that edition to read we're not recapping 3 right when we get to 4, because it's all the same thing. You don't need it. And I'm trying to sort of I'm trying to straddle that line a little bit between not losing people, but also not info dumping what just happened at the same time. It's a little bit of a dangerous game. I know, but it's one of the freedoms of being an indie publisher is I don't have an actual publisher saying, no, you need to do this and you're going to.
Mm-hmm. So, give you some freedom.
Yeah, I mean, even the Harry Potter did it with the first 2. The second Harry Potter opened with and this is what happened in the first book, basically, at some point, a couple pages in. And it was clear that they were doing that because they knew some people were going to just randomly pick up the second book and try to read it without reading the first. I think that was a big part of it. But in any case, it's not. It's just not how my brain works. I don't know.
Okay, so let me make sure I don't have any more questions about Nightmareland. Oh, I was going to ask you, did the pandemic impact your story at all? You said you had a lot of it already written. So was it written before, the quarantine and being stuck at home, or did that really impact your decision to release it?
So I lost my day job right when I was in the last act of City of Blood, so Volume 5. And by that point, I'd already had the release date established for the series, so there was no just backing out. I had review copies out, I had a date set. I'm just gonna go for this thing, see how it goes. I didn't know how it was gonna be releasing in a pandemic versus not, but people have time to read at least, and it didn't. I don't think pandemic stuff affected the plot of anything. It's already had those kind of pieces in play. I will say that it affected my mental health.
Like everybody.
I've been alone for a very long time, and I definitely hit a few rocky patches that were not conducive to writing particularly over this winter season. A lot of things kind of caught up with me all at once. Being away from family for over a year and a half, being estranged from all my friends, no work outlet, no, not even like, there's like no ability to go anywhere. I don't have a car. And then it's the cloudy Pacific Northwest where the sun goes away for like half a year. And I'm a California boy originally, so things have always affected me, but it wasn't really until this season where I was like, my God, this is affecting me. What's happening to me? Like, I don't have energy at all. So, really like physical ailment kind of stuff. But anyway, we don't have to get into all that. That pandemic has been challenging. How have you been?
Yeah, I have probably been blessed more than others. Luckily, I was able to work from home, so I was able to keep my job. But I do know it hasn't been easy for a lot of people. But I have, if you look at my reading, like how many books I read a month, I've always been an avid reader, so I'd always read like 4 books a month, but now I read like 10, 12, depending.
That's fantastic. That's great.
Well, there's some great books out there. You know what? I did not read self-published books before. One, they're not marketed, so they're not easily, in your face. But the other is, I guess I had kind of a prejudice against it. If they can't get a publisher to publish it, then maybe it's not good. But I have been sorely mistaken because I've picked up so many amazing books since I started really paying attention and listening to some great booktubers now who are really pushing self-published books. And so your book, your Nightmareland Chronicles has been one of those, and I'm so glad that I gave it a chance.
Yeah, thank you.
And so I get
it's sort of Kaigen, right? I saw that you had a review for the sort of Kaigen, which was amazing.
Fantastic book.
Yeah, Leslie got me to read that one. I'm guessing she probably got you to read that one too.
Did you like it?
It was so good. I mean, I had like some quibbles, only just because I feel like there was like I feel like the ending of the book went on a little bit too long. But I still really enjoyed it. I just think that like the emotional climax was definitely the duel. Like we both know, obviously. And there was just some like, especially because I was reading it on Kindle, there was kind of an expectation that like there was going to be a climax after that because of the amount of book that was left. Mm-hmm. But then it turned out that like a quarter of what was left was glossary. That makes sense that it was there. I just had no way of predicting it. And the rest was like closing matter. It was kind of like wrap up stuff. And I can't hold it against any of it. It was all like there primarily for people who read the mini series, kind of connecting those bridges a little bit. But that was like always like, what's going to happen now? And it's like the answer was like nothing really, but it's all really beautiful. And I was like, okay, I love it. I just like was left wanting a little bit more, but that's really the only thing. I mean, like I was like in tears reading that duel. Like I was like goosebumps everywhere, and it was just like sustained. She is by far the best at writing action that I've ever read. I mean, action is usually so boring after a little while, and this book was just like wall to wall action from like 30% to like 70. It was all fantastic, and it explored and plumbed the depths of these characters. I can go on about it forever. But in any case, I remember that I saw that review and I was like, yes, that was sort of Kaigen.
Yes, I wouldn't have picked that up. I mean, there's so many great books. Right now we're reading, I just read One Way by Jeff Lane. Mm-hmm. And it's like a time travel book, but it's not really about time travel. It's like time travel is just kind of an aspect of it. That one's really good. I've just been really happy with a lot of the self-published books that I've been picking up. And I have to thank a lot of the booktubers because I wouldn't want to scroll through all these lists in Amazon and just go, I just wouldn't take the time to do that. And now I'm like, there's some gems in there. I need to find them. But let's get ready to wrap this up because I've kept you on here so long already. I don't even know what time it is.
I'm chill, but I mean, don't worry on my account. I know you have a life to get back to as well too. I'm not even watching the clock. I'm enjoying a nice conversation. Thank you for having me.
I can't say enough about Nightmareland. I am not a big horror reader. I've read horror. I do pick it up now and then, but it's not something that I usually seek. It kind of falls in my lap. And I was kind of in the mood for something. And so when Leslie had her review on it, she kept saying such great things about it. I thought, well, what do I have to lose? The first book's only 150 pages. So if I don't like it, I don't read anymore, right? And then I was like, when I finished it, I was like, I'm so glad I still have 3 more to read. And then she told me about City of Blood. I was like, oh my God, I can't wait. So I will be patient for the rest of the books, but you have a fan and I will be reading them all because I have to know what happens.
Next one next Monday. So that's
yes, I already have my pre-order. I can't wait till it shows up on my Kindle. And that's why I kind of asked if you already had it planned out, because I was wondering, do you know how it's going to end? Do you already have that idea of how it's going to wrap up?
I have a good idea that's very likely to change. I mean, like, sometimes it's like I even have the last sentence in my head, but like that can just blow away like dust if something better comes along, or you know what I mean? Like, but I think I have a pretty strong idea, like character arc wise, like thematically wise, like still satisfying finale wise. Like, I think I've come to a place where I have something that makes sense. And sometimes it comes into my mind and I think about it a lot, but mostly I'm just trying to stay in the moment, because that's where the best work is done, is when you're in the moment. You're just like, I'm just doing this one scene. That's it. Like right here with the characters. Like, they don't know what's coming next. Like I'm just with them right now. But
that's so cool. So I just have a couple of questions to wrap up. So the first thing is, what would you do if you had all the money in the world? Would you keep writing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would stress less, obviously, about money. I would like go to the dentist more. Like little things like that, you know. Maybe travel a little bit, but like honestly, I'm a pretty simple person. Like I do a lot of traveling in my books. I just want to tell my stories and see some good people occasionally, and spend time with my dog, go on some road trips. Like,
have you been to the places that are in your books?
Yeah, some of them. I mean, some of them don't exist, but others do. So the Flashlighters through Lily, but particularly through City of Blood, I did a road trip and I connected with them like post sleepwalking events. So like I drove the road where they run into what Marcos, considers the nothings. I drove that road in the daylight on that. And I drove through I drove up Route 6, Bindle, into Eureka, where, like Flashlighters concludes, and City of Blood, it's Provo. And I followed essentially the same route. I went up the west side of Utah Lake rather than the east side, but essentially the same route that they did. Through that, so like books 4 and 5 are all like fairly precise and accurate concerning like geography. I made stuff up like South Point and Holden don't exist, and they're not based on the actual towns. And I don't, there's a road that goes through the valley like north and south, but there's no, like, as far as I know, there's no just road that cuts east and west into Nevada like that. but there is in my books. Sometimes I'm just like making stuff up, other times not. Haverhill, Maine. Haverhill is a real place in Massachusetts, but I guess it was in my brain somewhere, and I liked it, and I rolled with it. And I was like, oh, it's actually a real place in the state. It's like one state south. That's awkward. But I'm like, I'm having off of Maine. Like, I don't know. So, so sometimes we're like hit real places, and other times it's, it just, the goal is like trying to make it feel authentic and believable. And sometimes you achieve that by like as close to real as possible, and other times you achieve that through other ways and hope for the best, or you try to achieve that through other ways. Just hope for it.
That's cool. I was wondering because it feels like real places that you've actually experienced and been.
Wrightwood was the other one. I mean, I grew up next to Wrightwood, so that's a real place. I played with the geography a little bit, but it's fairly accurate. Most like more like the feel of the town is more or less, what it's like. I would think.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is just to let us know how we can find you. How can the readers find your books, more about you?
So I mean, I'm on Goodreads. That's an easy place. I'm on Amazon. That's another easy place. But the place you'll find, I'm on Instagram too. But the place that's easiest, the most reliable to find me is Twitter. My handle is @DBHFiction. Danny Barnett horror fiction, I guess what that breaks down to. But yeah, DBH fiction, and I'm on there too much. So
not too much. One of the things that I look forward to is what kind of thoughts you're thinking, because you just like the comment that you made the other day about whether or not dogs love us because of Stockholm syndrome.
Oh yeah, I felt so bad about that one, but I couldn't be the only one to have that thought, so I had to share it.
It's an interesting thought. I didn't think about that, but that's sad. But
one poor guy came in and commented. He said, and it wasn't even a mutual where I could like joke around with. It was somebody I'd never talked to before, and he never even responded to anything else. He just came in. He's like, "Oh man, we have a new puppy, and I was so proud that we got him housebroken. Now I just wonder if you broke his spirit." Like, I'm a monster.
Oh, that's awful. But yeah. I don't know. Your dog sounds like he doesn't, or is it a she? I'm sorry.
It's a he.
It's a he. He doesn't sound like he cares. It's like, I don't know who you're talking to, but you need to pay attention to me.
Yeah, he was wanting that attention, and mostly dinner. But it's that time where he starts to like give me extra attention until he gets dinner, and then he like relaxes a little bit. But yeah, he tried picking up his dish and showing me his dish. I was like, I'm busy. So he was like, screw this, I'm gonna make as much noise as possible.
That's awesome. Okay, well,
he does it all the time. Sorry, but like when I'm on the phone, he'll pick up a toy. Like I'm on the phone, like speakerphone, so we can hear the other person too, and he'll like wait for one of us to start talking, and then he'll speak over us.
Are you serious?
And he'll speak over us. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is too smart. Dogs are amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I had a lot of fun, and it means a lot to me that you're reading the series and that you're enjoying it.
Yes, definitely. I will. Anybody who asks, I will be telling them to read your book. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Keep promoting it, and I will keep retweeting all of your tweets because people have to read it. It's a great book, and it doesn't even have people. You don't even have to like horror, because I'm not a big horror reader, and I love it. It's an excellent take on characters in very hard situations and how they grow, and it's fantastic.